Charlotte. I am a new grad labor and delivery nurse, and I passed the NCLEX in 75 questions in May of 2022. So today I'm going to talk about the whole process to passing the NCLEX and the study strategies I used to get me there. So I just wanted to start by saying that I genuinely never thought I'd be able to make this video. I knew that I would eventually pass the NCLEX, but I really never thought that I would pass in 75 questions. A little bit about the NCLEX. The NCLEX stands for National Council, a licensure exam. So I'm looking at my notes. It is the exam that you have to take in order to become a registered nurse. There's two different versions of the exam. So there's the nclex-rn, which is for registered nurse, and then there's the nclex-pn, which is for licensed practical nurses. I took the RN version, which means that I am now a registered nurse. A little bit more about the exam is it is a computer adaptive test. So that's why some people say they passed 75 questions, or some people took the whole 145 questions. So you can get anywhere between that 75 to 145 questions. There's a lot of videos out there about how to pass the NCLEX in 75 questions. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't say anywhere on your license how many questions it took to pass. It doesn't even say how many questions it took. So anyone could lie and say that they passed in 75 questions. I know mine turned off at 75 questions, but I just want to reiterate that it is not important how many questions. As long as you pass, that's all that matters. There's a lot of videos, and I'm going to link some down below, that explain what the computer adaptive testing is, because there's a lot of people that can explain it a lot better than I do. But basically, the test is going to get harder or easier based on your answering questions correctly or incorrectly. And if you keep answering questions correctly, you'll stay above what they call the passing line, and that's how you pass the exam. And if the computer knows that you're above the passing line at 75 questions and knows for sure that you're within passing, it'll turn off. If it still needs to figure out, it'll give you more questions. So that's why you can have between 75 to 145 questions. But again, no one should get hung up on how many questions. You shouldn't freak out when it doesn't turn off at 75, because it doesn't matter. As long as you pass, you've passed. How long it takes, I think I did in under an hour. I'm a really fast test taker. I always have been, but I can also fail exams just as quickly as I can pass them. In nursing school, I was almost always the first of 3 or 4 of us out of 15 that finished nursing exams throughout nursing school, but I have failed some of those exams and I have passed some of those exams. So by no means does being quick mean that you're gonna pass. You have a full 5 hours to take the test, and you can take breaks at any time. The breaks that you take just go against your time. So if you take a 20-minute break, that just means you have 20 minutes less time to take the exam. And then you are also offered breaks where they'll say, do you wanna take a break? And that'll be at 2 hours, and then that'll be at 3.5 hours. It didn't take me that long to take the exam, so I don't know what that looks like. I did not take any breaks throughout my exam. It shut off at 75 questions and I left, and I was pretty certain I passed. I felt really good about it, but you never know. So I left, freaked out for the next 2 days. I did the Pearson VUE trick. I got the good message for the Pearson VUE trick. And then at 48 hours, I paid to have my quick results. And then a few days later, I got my registered nurse license from the state of Colorado. Kind of wanted to start from the very beginning and how to actually get to the point where you're at the testing facility and taking the NCLEX, because that is a really long process, not the drive. I did have a long drive because I didn't have a testing site near me. But in terms of just the actual process of getting your approved to test and then selecting a date to take the test, that process can be really long. So I've just laid out the process was for me. So the first step is that you have to apply for a license by examination. A license by endorsement is if you were to transfer, you already have a registered nurse license and you're transferring it, whether that be from another country, which I think is a much more involved process, or if you're transferring it from another state. So when you're a new grad nurse, you're going to apply for licensure by examination, and that exam is the NCLEX. And so I lived in Colorado at the time, and so I applied for a license through DORA, which is the Department of Regulatory Affairs, and I applied for that license. That part took longer than I was expecting because there was a couple of things that had to be true in order to apply for the license. You had to have graduated from your program, which that was fine. I was expecting to apply for my license the day of graduation. I was like, okay, once graduation comes, I'm gonna apply for my nursing license. Unfortunately, that was not the case because one of the stipulations is that you had to have a copy of your official transcript, and that official transcript had to have the date of graduation conference on the transcripts. My school didn't do that for like a week and a half to 2 weeks after graduation. So I just had to sit and wait before I could even apply. It was very upsetting. I was ready to take the NCLEX. I would have taken it the week or within 2 weeks of graduation. I felt ready. I felt good. I just wanted to take it. I'd done some mock exams, which I'll talk about my whole process for studying later. But I wanted to take the NCLEX ASAP, and it was really frustrating that I couldn't even apply for my nursing license, which is the process to get your approved to test, until my school put that date on my transcripts. So that was frustrating. I finished all my finals on April 27th, because then the following week our school had set up for us to go to a Kaplan NCLEX prep course, which I'll talk about that in a little bit. So all of my nursing school finals were done on April 27th. So I knew I'd passed nursing school April 27th, and then our pinning ceremony was May 6th, and our nursing school graduation date was May 7th. So I was expecting to apply on May 7th, but I actually didn't get that date put on my transcripts until, let's see here, it was May 18th. So that was 10 days, 11 days after graduation was when I was able to actually apply. And that was painful, having to wait and frustrating. And the other thing that was required in Colorado is that we had to have fingerprinting done. That I did well in advance because we were able to get the fingerprinting done before we applied. We had to have it done before we were able to submit our application. So I went with, they had two options, I believe. I'm not sure what the other one is, but I went with Identigo. And I did that on April 27th. So I had my fingerprints done well in advance. So I was ready for that. So once I was able to apply to the state on May 18th, then I had to wait for my authorization to test, or you hear people refer to it as ATT. I received my ATT May 25th. Some people got it within a day. They applied on May 18th and they got their ATT on May 19th. That was not the case for me. I got mine about a week and a half later, which was really frustrating because all the girls in my class were saying that they got their ATT right away. I don't know why it took longer for me, but it did. And they said that it could take up to, I think, like a month or two. So obviously I only had like a week and a half to wait to get my ATT, but it can take quite longer than that. So that's another process that's just sitting and waiting that can be really frustrating if you're ready to take that NCLEX. So I got the approved to test on May 25th. And at that point I had already registered to take the NCLEX with Pearson VUE. So you can't pick a date and then make an appointment to take the NCLEX until you get your ATT, but you can apply and make an account on Pearson VUE. You should do that around the same time that you apply for your nursing license. So I actually did that on May 2nd. I kind of wonder if that's why my ATT took so long, is because I had already applied to Pearson VUE. So I kind of wish I had waited until after I had completely submitted my application to the state before creating that Pearson VUE account. Once I was able to get my ATT on May 25th, that was when I scheduled my exam. And originally I scheduled to take it on May 23rd. 2 days later, I was like, nope, I'm done. I want to take this test as soon as possible. There were definitely earlier dates available when I went to go book my dates on May 25th. There were definitely dates earlier in June. When I went back 2 days later, the earliest I could book it that worked with my schedule was June 17th. So June 17th is when I actually took the NCLEX. I showed up to the site. I had an afternoon time. I had about 3-hour drive to my testing site. So I didn't want to have to stay in a hotel and I didn't want to have to get up crazy early. So I think I booked like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon to take the NCLEX. I drove down in the morning. I gave myself a ton of time. I went for lunch when I got down there. I went to Target. I went to Old Navy, like all just around where the testing site was. So initially I drove to the testing site. Then I kind of just shopped in the area until it was time for me to take my test. So I took the test on June 17th, and then I did the Pearson VUE trick that night. I got the good message, and then I paid to see my official or unofficial results is what they call them, and I did that on June 19th. And then I received my nursing license on June 21st. And then I started hospital orientation because I already had a job lined up, and so that was what my rush was to get the NCLEX done, is because I already had a job lined up and I wanted to start that job as soon as possible because I wanted to start making money. I was moving across the country. I moved from Colorado to Iowa for my job and I wanted to start as soon as possible. But I started my hospital orientation on June 27th, which is, I believe I was the first new grad they hired that started. So I was the earliest to start, and I think it is because I was so on top of everything, but it can take a long time. And I still feel like that's a really long time. From graduation being May 7th to then not getting my license until June 21st, I felt like that was forever. I really wanted it to go by quicker and it just didn't. That's the process. It takes that long. I remember after graduation texting my boss and being like, hopefully I can start at the beginning of June. And she replied back and she was like, yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen that quick. So definitely most employers are aware that it takes a while to take the NCLEX and then get your license, even if you do it pretty quickly. I also wanted to go over how much it cost to get your license, because it's not cheap by any means. If you're expecting it to be cheap, you're in for a rude awakening. So I added up all the prices of everything I paid. I had to pay $54.40 to do my fingerprint and background check. I had to pay $2.85 to Parchment, which is the company my school used to get a copy of my transcripts. I had to pay $200, which is the fee that I paid to Pearson VUE to take the NCLEX. And I had to pay $190. I had to pay to the state of Colorado to apply for my nursing license. I then paid $7.95 was the price to see the quick results through Pearson VUE. So if I did my math correctly, the grand total for how much it cost to get my nursing license was $455.30. Considering I had just been in school, that is a lot of money. Because I moved to Iowa, I also then had to pay for a license in Iowa, which costs money as well, but that's not the point of this video, so I'm not gonna go into that. It's a pricey process, and that also doesn't include what I paid for study materials, because I did choose to purchase study materials in addition to materials provided by my school. So that kind of leads us to go on to talk about how I studied for the NCLEX. So back in February or March, I wanted to start studying for the NCLEX. I purchased the full NCLEX flashcard set from Level Up RN. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna study, I'm gonna watch all the videos, and leading up to graduation, I'm gonna have all of the videos watched, and I'm gonna have this whole thing, and I'm gonna have all this material reviewed. Did I even barely touch the flashcards? I think I spent $400 on the flashcard set from Level Up RN and I didn't touch them. That if I was gonna spend that money, I wish I had bought the Level Up RN cards at the beginning of nursing school and used them all throughout nursing school, because I had been using the Level Up RN videos. I'll link to that down below if you're not familiar, but she does a really great job of explaining everything, and I wish I had the matching flashcards for just studying for nursing school. Did I have the time in my last semester of nursing school to use those flashcards and do an in-depth topic, head-to-toe topic review? No, I didn't. It made me a little nervous when I got to the end of nursing school, because I was like, oh boy, I am not prepared. I haven't reviewed all this subject material. I'm in big trouble. But what gave me a lot of confidence is my school used Kaplan. That was the study materials that my school provided for us to study for the NCLEX. And we had to do Kaplan integrated tests. So at the end of every class, we had to do a Kaplan test and see how we did on it. And if we didn't meet a certain threshold, then we had to do remediation. I was gonna say I had a love-hate relationship with Kaplan. I just had a hate relationship with Kaplan. I hated taking the exams. I hated the format of the questions. I didn't find their explanations helpful at all. The only thing that I did find helpful is when I got to the end of nursing school in April, I believe they had us take all of our integrated exams. We had to take a test that was like a mock NCLEX, and I did really well on it. And I think they gave us 3 or 4 opportunities to take it. So we had to take it one week. If we didn't get a passing grade on it, we had to come back the next week and so forth. And I think we had 3 opportunities to do that. We didn't have to pass it to finish nursing school. We just had to keep taking it and doing the remediation if we didn't pass. But I passed on my first attempt and I actually did really well on it. And also all the subject specific integrated tests that I took at the end of nursing school, I did really well on as well, which hadn't been the case for most of nursing school. Most of nursing school, I would say did pretty mediocre on the Kaplan integrated tests. So getting to the end of nursing school and realizing I do know how to answer NCLEX style questions because I'm clearly doing really well on these Kaplan. B, I'm answering these questions and I do know what the subject material is. So I clearly have a better basis of this information than I had originally thought. So that's what made me really confident to go, okay, I'm ready to take this test. I want to take it. I did really well on the integrated test. I want to get the NCLEX done as soon as possible. I don't need to study for the whole summer. I want to get it done. I did feel like I wanted more practice questions, which we had a whole Q bank available to us from Kaplan, but I did not find their explanations useful at all. What I felt was lacking from Kaplan was that they didn't have a tutor mode. So your Q bank, you would say, you could pick how many questions you could do in the Q bank, and then you could see the explanations as to whether you got it correct or wrong once you finished the quiz. I felt like it would be better for me to answer the question and then see the explanation so that while it's fresh in my head, while I still know how I thought through that question, I can then read the explanation, which is what I ended up using was UWorld, and they have a tutor mode, which I found way more useful than Kaplan. The other thing is I didn't feel like Kaplan explained why certain answers were incorrect very well. They provided a lot of information to back up why the correct answer was correct, but that doesn't help when NCLEX style questions tend to be what is the most correct answer. And if there's 2 or 3 answers that are technically correct, I didn't feel like they had very good explanations as to why the other answers were not the most correct, if that makes sense. And so I ended up using UWorld. I did a sample of their program and I absolutely loved it. The explanations were spot on. I found that super helpful. Loved UWorld. So I decided to pay. I bought the 90-day access to UWorld. I knew I wasn't going to use it for 90 days, but the reason I went with the 90-day access is because it included 2 self-assessments. I took the first self-assessment. I had answered some of the UWorld questions, but just to get myself familiar with the exam and the format of the program. But I took that self-assessment, I believe, on Thursday, so the day before pinning ceremonies. That would have been May 5th. And I got a very high probability of passing the NCLEX, which gave me huge confidence. That's why I had a fire underneath me. I had now done really well on the integrated exam for Kaplan. I had now gotten a very high probability of passing the NCLEX from my first self-assessment on UWorld. So that's why I was like, let's take the NCLEX. Like, I want to do it. I have everything fresh in my head. Let's do it. So then once I found out the process was going to be a bit longer. That's when I started doing UWorld questions daily. I did anywhere from like 100 to 175 questions a day. I know that I didn't finish the Q bank completely, but I think I got 80 to 90% of the way through all of the questions. So I was really happy with my progress, and I was pretty high. I believe I was in the 70th percentile of answering questions, the UWorld Q bank questions correct. I then took the second self-assessment exam, I believe about a week before I took the NCLEX. This freaked me out because the second self-assessment, I only got a high probability of passing the NCLEX, which is still great. And I should have taken confidence from that. But after the first one getting very high probability, on the second one when I only got high, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna fail the NCLEX, and it freaked me out a little bit. But I decided I've already done this. I'm gonna go take the test. If I fail, I fail. I'll take it again. No big deal. That was my UWorld experience. I highly recommend UWorld. I don't think it's necessary to purchase prior to starting intensive NCLEX studying. I wouldn't go through all the questions, and then I think they have an option to reset your Q bank. I wouldn't go through all of the questions and then like reset it when you're doing intensive studying. I just think that doing those questions is really helpful. It gets you in the mindset. You can choose which topic, but I decided to do it from head to toe. So I started with labor and delivery review, and I also believe I did some of the stuff that I knew was easier for me. So I did like health assessment, fundamentals were the first 2 I did, and then I started through the lifespan. So I did all my OB questions. I then did all of my pediatrics questions. And then I worked from head to toe body system. So I would do all my neuro questions, all my cardiac questions, GI questions, kidneys, renal. So I just worked my way through the body systems. There's two schools of thought. A, the NCLEX doesn't say, okay, we're gonna test you on OB questions now. The NCLEX will take one question will be on blood types, and then the next question will be on a cardiac med, and then the next question might be on an assessment. So you bounce all over the place when you take the NCLEX. It is not systematic like the way I studied, but I found that by doing all cardiac questions together, it was very reinforcing because I would read an explanation and then maybe 10 questions later get a question that I knew the answer because I had just read an explanation from a different question. And so for me, it really reinforced, it was like positive reinforcement of the material I was learning from the explanations. So I found that to be phenomenal for me. I reviewed the pharmacology with the body system. So when I did cardiology, I also did all the cardiology medications and so on. And that was what I found most effective. I believe some of the questions that I had left at the end was some of the leadership questions, which I knew I did really well on my leadership Kaplan integrated test. So I wasn't so worried about leaving some of those. And I believe I had some pharmacology questions left at the end of the UWorld when I took my NCLEX. So overall, I was really satisfied with using UWorld, and I ended up passing the exam. So I would say I'm giving UWorld a glowing review. Kaplan, I think the integrated test, since I had to do it for school, it did give me confidence at the end. Would I personally recommend going out and purchasing Kaplan? No, there's no way I would ever recommend purchasing Kaplan. It just didn't work for me. I didn't find the explanations useful. I used UWorld. The other thing I did is I purchased the nclex-rn book. I will insert, I can't remember the specific book I used, but I'll insert a picture here of the book that you guys can see. I purchased that the second semester of nursing school, and I used that book all throughout nursing school to study because it had really consolidated bullet points of each topic, which I found super helpful because going through nursing school, I did not have time to be an A student. I did not have time to study every minute detail of every disease process. My logic when I was studying in nursing school is the NCLEX is gonna ask broad questions about this. If the NCLEX does ask a really detailed question about this one specific disease process, if I get it wrong, I get it wrong. You're allowed to get questions wrong on the NCLEX. And I felt the same way about my nursing school exams. I knew that the nursing school exams were for the most part going to be about general, do I overall understand the topic? And so that's what I focused on with my studying. I did not get into the nitty gritty almost ever unless I needed the nitty gritty to understand the bigger picture, if that makes sense. And so I used that book and I highly recommended using that throughout nursing school, but I didn't actually use it very much when it came time to intensive NCLEX studying. So that is what it looks like for me studying. I'm so relieved that I'm done and I will never have to take the NCLEX again in my life. I'm honestly glad that that is done and behind me because it's a very stressful exam. Some advice that I want to give you if you are preparing to study for the NCLEX, if you're in nursing school, or even, I believe I started watching videos like this at the beginning of nursing school because I knew that at the end I'd have to take the NCLEX. Just don't stress about it too much. At the end of the day, it is a big exam, but there's nothing you can do about it. You can only just study. And if you study well in nursing school and you do well in nursing school and then you take studying for the NCLEX seriously, I don't think that I would have done as well on the NCLEX. I don't even know if I would have passed it had I not taken studying seriously. I did study, I did anywhere from 100 to 175, sometimes even over 200 questions per day in the weeks leading up to taking the NCLEX. And I think that taking that seriously is really necessary. I also listened to advice, and I believe that you should too, of take the day off before the NCLEX. Don't study the day before the NCLEX. Just relax, take a break. I definitely started winding down my studying 3 or 4 days before taking the NCLEX just to give my brain a real rest. Cramming the day before the NCLEX is not is not the way to pass the NCLEX. Even if you haven't done any studying, I still don't recommend cramming or studying the day before the NCLEX because I just don't think that it's going to be useful for you. The NCLEX is not an exam that you can cram or stay up late and study for and pass. You have to just long, consistent studying to pass that test. Really being familiar with the process. I wish I had understood how long it would take to take the NCLEX way before the week of graduation. That process was so long and I just wish I had understood it. So whatever state you live in, I highly recommend you start looking up now what the requirements are to get your approved to test, what the timeline might look like, read boards from other students as to how long it took them to take it. I've heard that in some states it can be much longer than the process that it was for me. So I think just being really well aware of that, and then best of luck and best of studying. You've got this. I know you've got it. You're gonna pass. It's okay to take it more than once. It's okay to not pass in 75 questions. It doesn't matter. And I think that also, I was very prepared and I was very aware of what question I was on, and I was very prepared for it to go over. I assumed that I was going to get the full number of questions. I assumed I was gonna get 145 questions. So when it turned off at 75 questions, I was elated, but I don't think that I would have panicked had it kept going. Because at the end of the day, it does not matter how many questions it takes for you to pass the NCLEX. If you got any value out of today's video, please give it a thumbs up down below. That really helps me with making content so I can make more content that's useful for you guys. And if you want more nursing content about I am a mom-to-be, I am also a labor and delivery nurse and a new grad. So if you want nursing school, new grad nurse, labor and delivery, or new mom content, please consider subscribing below so you don't miss any of my videos. I look forward to seeing you again soon, and happy studying. Bye.